intro to the camp. Got you. Okay, we're gonna make it happen. Hello, my name is Jaylee Mitchell. I am the head coach of women's basketball here at the University of North Texas. I am here with Lana from women's soccer, Tatum from track and field, and Alicia from women's volleyball. First of all, thank you guys for taking the time to come and have a conversation with me. Really looking forward to visiting and for what you guys have to share with everyone. We'll kind of just jump right in, and I'll start with this question. What is it that you guys feel like needs to change when it comes to race relations in our society?
I'll go first. I'm a history major at UNT, so I've been studying, American history for a very long time here in like my advanced classes and stuff, and just studying how it's been for so long and looking into how it is today currently in our, government. I personally think that nothing will change in society or really in our communities until things change in the system, because it's my personal understanding that the system is not meant to help everybody in it. And it does, it consistently gives advantage to white people, and it consistently forgets about minorities. So I think that until, that is changed in our governments and in the entire system in general, I don't think that there will be any meaningful change like within our societies or communities until, our government, our leaders take that change.
Great answer, and to that effect, when you say that, I know just specifically speaking to education, what we learn in schools, I think has come up, at least in my platforms and in my conversations, what specifically about how we educate everybody as they go through elementary, middle school, high school, even on up to college. How is it that we can make some changes in the educational system to make sure that we don't really fuel what you're talking about, fuel that where we don't teach the things we're supposed to teach, where history is somewhat changed, or we learn something different than what actually occurred. Where do we start with that?
So I was planning on being a teacher for a very long time, actually. So in high school I did teaching programs and stuff to learn about how curriculums are made. And from a historical perspective, I think that it needs to change in the curriculum just nationally in the first place, because taking history classes here about Texas history or American history during the Civil War or World War II or something like that, I learned so many more things about different people that have never been included in public school textbooks. And it's also, largely taught in history classes in college that, the textbooks that we are provided in our public schools aren't necessarily historically accurate, and they tend to be whitewashed, and they tend to only focus on the white heroes of this country, and they tend to kind of put the minorities historically into a box and make it seem like they needed the help of people who, like, for example, came to colonize America and things like that. So I think that until those narratives are kind of changed in history books and just the curriculum in general, that it won't really change. And it needs to happen in every subject, obviously, and we need to be teaching more empathy and things like that in schools, but I think that, history and the curriculum for that needs a huge reevaluation.
Awesome, thank you. Anything you guys want to add?
I feel like just the generic black stereotypes, they need to go. Like the population, like even me, like I have stereotypes for black people, white people, but it's like the stereotypes for black people, I feel like it's more, I feel like it's more like not like in a good light. It's more like, oh, we're putting us down. And I feel like if you can put like white people or instead of people of color like in a good, like we deserve the same like fairness, if that makes sense. I don't know, I just feel like, because I've noticed since everything's happened, I look at stuff very differently, and it's like I see stuff like way clearer now, and I just feel like the stereotypes need to go.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. That actually kind of leads me to my next question. Are there any specific issues that you guys deal with that we feel like are societal, or things that shine that negative light on people of color?
Definitely, I feel like black and brown people are overrepresented in the media for like crimes or just like bad light is shined on them in general. So I feel like going back to what you said earlier, like how we can educate people throughout school, the New York Times just started this series called 1619, and it basically talks about how the history that's written and that's being taught in schools is not like accurate. Like Tatum said, it's whitewashed. So it basically talks more about how African Americans were put down or enslaved and how this led to the society that was built today. So I feel like that something like that should be included in like history when it's taught in schools, because like right now what we're learning is not necessarily like what happened. Like people were colonized, people were enslaved, and that led to what we're being taught. But it's just like I feel like we're missing out a lot on our history, because I personally, like before I came to college, like I wasn't taught, like of course we learned about slavery like in school, but I've learned so much more being a criminal justice major and political science major here, like how institutional racism, not just individual racism, has kind of like put a burden on African Americans, because it's not just like we're just trying to change someone's thought process, but it's like the system itself is against us. So you have to change that before you can see any progress, I feel.
For sure. Y'all giving some great insight. Thank you. My next question is how can we help affect change? I think one thing you guys brought up in particular is how we're educated. Are you finding that it's easier now to find information now that you know there are things that you didn't know or didn't learn in the system, or is it still difficult to find the truth?
I would say it's still difficult, because now that it's being shed more, I feel like even like Twitter algorithms and Instagrams, any social media, or even any news platforms, like they're burying it. Like I didn't even know about what happened in Wisconsin until like days later, because I honestly don't really watch the news. Like I honestly get my news from social media. I didn't know until like my coaches said anything, and I feel like even if I did watch the news, they wouldn't put it on like local news till like days after. Like the George Floyd, we didn't know about that till days after it happened. So I feel like maybe a slight change, but no.
I think that with all of like the social medias and all those outlets we have now, it's very easy to see a lot of information, and people sometimes mistake that for being informed, I think, because I think a lot of times people like us hesitate to watch actual news channels like, you know, Fox News or CNN, because we know that depending on the channel you get, you're going to get some sort of bias regardless. And I think that it's refreshing for social media that we don't have that bias. However, it's also hard with social media because we don't know the credibility of anybody who's on it at all. So I think it's easy for us to kind of try to stick to social media because we think that it's our own peers showing us information, so it must be true. And we do see things like videos of police brutality at protests and things that we're not going to see in the general news outlet. But I also think that's very hard because social media is not completely reliable, and also it's, you know, a burden on some people's mental health and things like that. So I think it might be easy to find information and find things to look at, but I think it's a lot harder now to differentiate what's real and what's valid information and what's not.
Absolutely. It reminds me of The Social Dilemma, if y'all haven't watched that on Netflix. But how can we help affect change? What are things that we can do, things that we can put together? Obviously, we're here having a conversation, which I think is an incredible way to share and kind of get new ideas and put some things into action that maybe we didn't feel like were necessary before. But is there anything specific that you guys feel you want to do, that you want your teams to do, you want your families, your communities to do in order to help affect change?
I think it definitely starts with how you said education, like at just the bare minimum level. I know we had a diversity like meeting, and it was like not all the student athletes were involved. It was kind of just like a test to see how it would go. And I know the second group didn't get to do it because like there was some issues that we had to work out with the communication. But I just feel like right now a lot of people on my team like say like they're just uninformed, like they're not aware of certain microaggressions that they have or that they don't have, and it's like they'll say some stuff and it's like what you just said, it was insensitive to race, and they're like, oh, like I didn't even realize that. So I just feel like it starts with education, just educating people, just having a conversation about it, because I feel like race is something like people are scared to talk about. Racism is something that people are scared to talk about. I just think that we just need to be more open about it and actually educate our student athletes and not just talk about it, but actually put action behind it. So, yeah.
I think that's really important. I think that, what she said about starting the conversation is super important. And I think that having conversations like we are having right now is very important. But I think that, once we talk about people who kind of have the same beliefs as each other, like we're kind of getting our thoughts right now, because I feel like we're all kind of on the, same, like mind state on all of this. But I think that we need to go further than this, like she said, and have these conversations with people who don't necessarily agree with us. And it's really, really, really hard to do that with people who, do maybe have hate or prejudice in their hearts. But I mean, until we have that conversation and we see for ourselves, I think as individuals, when we're talking to these people, like whether or not they're willing to listen and willing to make a change, then I don't think that, like you said, or like you asked, any real change will be made, because, I mean, it starts with us, and it starts with the system too, and the system isn't making anything any easier. But I think, like she said, it all starts with individual conversations and changing those who we know might have, hurtful or prejudiced mindsets.
And I wouldn't necessarily say like change, because like a lot of my teammates like came out to me and they're like, oh, well, because my beliefs aren't the same as yours, like I don't want to like come off as me being like prejudiced or something. I'm like, no, like that's not what it is at all. Like politically, like I don't care, like as long as you're educated behind it, like that's fine. But it's like, I want everyone's voice to be heard and not necessarily change what you think, but just like give you insight on like how I feel about it, being a black woman, like how what you say affects me, or how like just give insight, because a lot of people don't see like institutional racism, like going back to that, like they don't see how laws disproportionately affect minorities, because it's not written like, oh, a black person can't do this, a black person can't do that. But it is fact that like these laws that are created and statutes that are created disproportionately affect minorities, and minorities are, black and brown men specifically, are overrepresented in the prison system because of these laws. And it's like people don't realize that, because like Tatum said, people don't watch the news. They take a lot of their information from social media, and that's a positive, but it's also a negative, because the camera right now is what's saving a lot of people. It's what's highlighting police brutality. It's what's showing like what's really going on. But at the same time, it's all about perception. So someone could say like, that's just a perception of what was shown on the camera, but this officer may have been justified. So I just feel like just education, really, just talking about it. It needs to be a conversation. Yeah.
I feel like going on with the education, like for example, we only learn about Black History Month in February. I feel like if that can be a consistent basis how we learn about what happens in America, world history, any other country, like I feel like if we can do that for Black history as well, that would be like phenomenal too, because like people learn about it for a month, the shortest month in the year at that. So I feel like if we can just have schools talk about Black history more than February, that would be a change too.
If I'm hearing you guys correctly, the biggest thing is you want people to be informed. It's kind of like when you know better, you can do better, right? So my next question is kind of two-part, because one, I think what's been eye-opening for me personally is you have people that know better, or they're learning better, learning more about what's going on and how this all came to be, and they still have the same feelings and emotions and thoughts and actions as they had before they knew. Second part of that is you have people that become more informed, but then they may remain silent, or they may just say, hey, I'm not racist, so this doesn't apply to me. Do you guys have a message for either of those parties, either of those groups of people? Is there anything that you'd like to share or shed light on?
I think the second party you mentioned, just specifically about the ones who are like, well, it doesn't affect me, so why should I, care, have a say in it? I think that's incredibly just offensive towards basically everybody. And I think that it's just extremely selfish to have that mindset, because racism might not personally affect you, or homophobia might not personally affect you. You never know, how it might affect your friends or your family or your children one day, and you never know how it's going to affect those people. So I think that just to say that you don't care about it just because it's not affecting you is selfish. And then that's, like kind of a given that it's selfish to have that mindset. But I think that it's really, really hard just for me to make excuses for those people, because that goes past ignorance, and that's just pure like self-preservation, and that's something that we see a lot today, that lack of empathy. But I think that, that's just my opinion, I think it's inexcusably selfish, kind of. I don't really see a way that we can teach people who have that mindset of not caring about other people how to care about others, if that makes any sense.
I feel like if you're silent, you're part of the problem as well. Like, I mean, I understand it doesn't affect you personally, but you don't know what anyone else is going through. Like, honestly, you don't have to necessarily say something, but if you don't acknowledge it at all, then that's a problem. Like, you have to look within yourself to see that that's a problem.
And I feel like a lot of people who make the argument, they say, well, everyone starts at an equal playing field. Like, everyone has the opportunity to go to college or to better their life. Like, we all grew up, we all, we started with nothing. But it's not just about equality, it's about equity, because some people don't have the same advantages as others. Like, and I feel like, not to be blunt, but white people were bestowed with privileges from the second that they got here, from the second that they colonized the U.S. And it's people fail to realize that it's generational wealth that's been passed down from them that Black people didn't get, because we were enslaved, and we were, like I said, enslaved. And it's my grandfather and his grandfather before that, and our ancestors, we didn't have the same privileges that y'all did. So the bare minimum is not equality, it's equity. So I feel like there needs to be some sort of, people need to be educated about that. It's not an equal playing field. People don't come from the same economic backgrounds, people don't come from the same type of family, or aren't guaranteed the same opportunities that you are. And I feel like it's just people realizing that, because it's not just because you work hard at something, that doesn't mean it's guaranteed. Just because you put your all into something, it's not guaranteed, because not everyone starts at a level playing field. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's...
To go off of that, I took a multicultural psychology class here, and we had a whole kind of chapter about institutional racism and how white privilege is, a huge factor in that, and how reverse racism is not a thing. And it's kind of like how she was saying that, when the institution is flawed itself, when the institution perpetuates these racist, laws, these racist people that are leading the system, it's pretty impossible for that racism that's at the top of that institution, at the top of that system, to go down. So when white people, say that maybe this person was racist to me, that's just not true, because reverse racism can't exist in a system in which racism rules the system, if that makes any sense. You can't go down in a system that was created to benefit a certain person. I think to go off of that, what she said about white privilege is also extremely relevant, because white people, I think, tend to kind of just switch their open minds off when they hear white privilege, and they tend to get defensive because they think that white privilege means that white people haven't worked hard for their accomplishments, or that they, haven't really earned anything they've accomplished, when it, like she said, is just an advantage, and it's a built-in advantage. When I get pulled over by the police, I'm not worried about, losing my life. I'm worried about getting in trouble and getting a ticket and having to pay money. And, when I go to school, I'm more likely to get called on by my teachers and get attention from them, because I'm white and I'm not a, Black or brown person, sorry. But, I think that it's just, again, like we said earlier, about educating people on what the realities of white privilege and, racism and reverse racism and how that's not a thing are. And I think that as student athletes, we have a big platform, and we have voices that we can use. And, beyond just educating other adults and people our age on it, I think that children really look up to us, and that's another big thing, because I think people our age and older are harder, they're more solidified in their mindsets. And I think that if we give our energy to them and they don't, return any of it back and don't try to change themselves, then we're just going to be okay, well, that's fine, we tried it. But I think that we also need to put a lot more energy into our younger generation and the kids, because if we can teach empathy to them, then I think that it's going to solve so many more problems that we're having right now, just from people who weren't, really taught that same empathy.
And you say that about the student athletes having the platform, and I think we're all a part of teams, have been a part of teams of different backgrounds, different shapes, sizes, colors, everything. what is it that you guys feel like society can learn from us as we've been in those locker rooms, been in those situations? What can society learn from teams that have had to share this for, I mean, your whole lives? You've been doing this your whole lives, and what do people need to know and understand?
I think being a part of a team, you have to realize like people are coming from all different backgrounds, how you said. So like your views, how you see the world is not necessarily how like the person sitting next to you or the person playing next to you on the field sees the world. So I feel like already you have to be not cautious, but like understanding of your teammates' values, of their morals that they've been taught. Because if you're not, like, you're all working towards a common goal. Like, you want to win a championship together. You want to, like, that person is not just like somebody who you're playing next to, but that like is your family. So like you have to be understanding of that. And I feel like it's easier for us as student athletes to understand that because we're all working towards a common goal. So I feel like until we can get everyone to like understand that common goal of defeating racism, or like just acknowledging that it's there, I feel like it's going to be hard to get everyone to like agree on that, if that makes sense.
I think it's important that you said that we just need to have them acknowledge that racism is here, because, you know, just listening to the presidential debates, they love to talk about the problem of race and not the problem of racism, when, you know, people being a certain race is not the issue. It's the racist people who are making that an issue. So I think that it's just small things like that, and just wording things like, you know, saying enslaved people instead of slaves, because saying slaves kind of perpetuates the idea that that was their identity rather than their circumstance. So I think that until we just acknowledge like the smallest things, like just the way we say things and the way we kind of talk about racism and the problems that it, you know, has caused and still causes, is very important, because it's just the small things like that that, you know, tend to maybe point people towards a certain bias or a certain, you know, mindset, just because of those small like adjectives and little words that we use. So I think that that's something we need to acknowledge more often.
I also think that it's important that as a team we always stand united, and I feel like if we can unite about there is a problem of racism, that the outside looking in can acknowledge that there's a problem with racism as well. Like we're not just seeing stuff. We are a united front, and we're seeing that there's a problem, that there needs to be a change.
I have one final question, if that's okay with you guys, and just something I'd like to try to clear up. I think since George Floyd, we've all heard, tweeted, stated, Black Lives Matter. When you say that, when you tweet that, when you mean that, are you referring to the organization, or are you referring to something different?
I'm sorry, you know. Personally, I'm referring to my life. I don't know, it's just felt like since it's happened, I've honestly, I feel like I was in a bubble, honestly. I grew up in a diverse neighborhood, family, and I've had experiences, but like I don't think, because I was like little, like maybe 7th, 8th, 9th grade. I didn't really think much of it, but when I talked to my mom about it, she was like, no, like that was not okay. And then honestly, just like personal experiences, like me being pulled over by a cop, I got pulled over by a cop after the situation. I was terrified, because it's like, am I gonna lose my life? I was told to put my hands on my steering wheel, so so they know there's nothing in my hands. So when I think of Black Lives Matter, I'm thinking that my life should matter as much as any other color, person, ethnicity. Like it should matter, like as much as the next. I'm sorry, I cannot speak, but like not more, but just equal. So.
For me, I mean, it just, Black Lives Matter means that Black Lives Matter. I mean, yes, I'm like, you know, acknowledging the organization and the movement and stuff, but I think just, you know, having, you know, white peers and white followers like on my Twitter and my Instagram, who sometimes like comment things like, well, all lives matter, or even I've had comments that say like Black lives don't matter or white lives matter. I think that, getting comments like that makes it kind of seem like when people say Black Lives Matter, they're trying to kind of like fight or start an argument. And I think that kind of, goes with that thing that when people think that, tackling the racism problem in America means dismantling America, and that's not what it means, but that kind of, lets us into the hint that racism kind of is embedded in America. But I think all that just goes to say that when I say Black Lives Matter, I mean that Black Lives Matter, period. And I don't mean that other lives don't matter. It's just the fact that Black lives in America are, at higher risk of getting, murdered by the police or getting brutalized by the police or, really just anything else in America simply because they are Black. And other minorities are, in that same boat too. However, right now I think that we are tackling the problem of, Black people not being of the same value to some people in society. And I think that, that's all it really needs to mean is that, Black Lives Matter, and that's kind of self-explanatory.
I think like matter is like the minimum. Like we shouldn't just matter, like we shouldn't just be like, okay, like we see you, you're Black, we see that, like we acknowledge that, but it's like, so now that you acknowledge that, like let's change the system. Let's not create a system that disproportionately affects us, that disproportionately puts us in prison, but like actually like change. So when I say Black Lives Matter, like going back to what she said, how she grew up in a bubble, I didn't. Like I grew up in a small town. Like my dad is white, my mom is Black, so I come from a racially and ethnically diverse family where like race has always not been a topic of discussion, but like it's always been like relevant. Because like when I go to school, it's like, oh, like your mom or your dad doesn't look like you, like what are you? And it's like, I don't want to, like saying Black Lives Matter to me just means like I just want to feel like included. Like I don't want to feel like the world that I live in or the country that I live in is against me. And I feel like a lot of people do feel like that. Like a lot of people feel like their voices aren't heard. There's a lot of Black people who feel like even if they do go out and vote, like it's not going to make a difference because the system is already against them. And I feel like just changing that mindset will change a lot because yes, protesting is good, going out and protesting, going out and making these signs, but like we're not going to see change really until people actually go out and vote. And I know that's hard because there is like voter restrictions and they are making it hard for our voices to be heard, but we do need to educate people. Like change starts by changing the system, not just necessarily like an individual thought. So I just feel like Black Lives Matter, to me, it should matter to everybody, but it's not like just saying that is the minimum,
Right. Your responses, and I'm sorry, I know I said one final question, but your responses did bring up one more. I've heard about voting. I've heard, Black people, we're concerned when we get pulled over by the police. We're afraid of being murdered by the police. We have these concerns that are different from other people. Is there anything else? I know you guys are in college and you'll be graduating whenever it is, whenever your time is. Is there anything more or any other specific areas of concern that you guys have as you leave college to start life? Is there anything else that makes you fearful, makes you concerned, where you won't have the same opportunities as another person or a non-Black person? I know specifically just speaking to Atlanta and Alicia, but also Tatum, like is there anything, because I know you've been awesome and pretty vocal about your feelings and your thoughts. I don't want to leave you out on that question, but is there anything that you fear for your friends and people that you speak for?
For sure. My friends have sent me texts before, like I just got pulled over by the police and immediately I'm extremely worried for their lives because being friends with Black men and Black women, and especially, Black men who are athletes here and who are maybe bigger and taller and stronger and wearing things like hoodies, it's scary. And I know that, I can't even speak on how scary it is because I have never experienced that in my life and I never will. But it's so terrible to think about like how Black people have to fear for that every time they just walk out of the house, and how they have to think about what they might wear so they don't look too threatening or too suspicious and to not get stopped by the police. So, I know that, me saying that has no effect on the situation and the circumstance, but it's terrible to think about how, Black people have to think about that every single day, and my friends and my teammates. It's just not good.
I think my only concern is like when I graduate and like get into the work field, I don't want to, first of all, I don't want to get a job just because, oh, she's black, that's the only reason she got that job. Or the opposite, I did not get the job because I am not black. Like, I want to be a teacher. I don't know if I want to be a teacher. Right now I want to be a teacher. And I don't want to just get a job just because I'm black, or get a job and it's not like at a, not like at a fancy, like in a bad neighborhood, and like, oh, she can handle them because she's been through that, you know. I don't want that stereotype. So like going back to what I said earlier, stereotypes like need to stop. So that's my only concern.
Going back to what Tatum said, just about how like interactions with the police, like I know people have been told to never fit the profile, so like change how you look, so like whenever you're walking down the street or whenever you're driving your car, like you never fit the profile, like you're never wearing your hoodie up, you're never wearing a certain type of clothes that are more likely to be involved in like with criminals. And I just feel like we shouldn't have to change who we are to fit a society that's already against us. My concern going out into the world, necessarily just being black in general, just like what are the challenges going to be, like, and being a woman, like, because women, we're another minority, like, and people fail to realize that, like, even though like women are the majority, there's more women than men, but like we still are a minority. And I just feel like being black and being a woman, that's just two things that's already against us. And so that's like something I'm nervous about, like going out into the workforce, because I do want to be a lawyer when I grow up. So it's just like, what do I have to face? Like, what's next, you know? I don't know.
And to that end, why should we vote?
I think that voting might seem like a futile effort to some people, and that's a very valid thing to think, because I mean, when you look at our two candidates, both of them do have, you know, racist past and things that they said in the past, and neither option, you know, might seem like a good one to some people. However, you know, as futile as it may seem, voting is the bare minimum of the things that we can do as citizens of the United States. And I think that, you know, not voting and getting too defeated and thinking that it's not going to change anything in the first place is kind of what, you know, people like the Trump administration want to happen. And you look at, like she said, all the voter suppression techniques that are happening right now still, and how, you know, places like, I'm not sure what county it is, Harrison County, is that where Houston is? Yeah, Harris County, yeah. I saw today on Twitter that there's only going to be one, I think, location where you can drop off your mail-in ballots, and there was supposed to be, I believe, 12, and the Greg Abbott administration is getting all of those places shut down. So I think that we have to just do our best to vote, especially in, you know, places where it's really, really, really trying to be suppressed, because that's just, I think, the first base of what we can cover to getting more change. And there's more change that needs to happen, but I don't think that anybody can really talk about that kind of change unless they've done the bare minimum of voting.
I think voting is important, very important, because you can't change the system without a vote. Like, and a lot of people don't vote or feel like it's not necessary because they're like, I'm gonna vote, but like I'm one in millions of people, so like it's not even gonna matter. But like, you're not just voting for the president, you're voting for people who elect public officials like judges, or like people who create these statutes that are disproportionately affecting you. So if you just feel like, oh, like I like these two candidates, like me voting is just choosing the lesser of the two evils. Like, it's not just about voting for the president, it's about voting for those in Senate, it's about those voting for your governor, it's about voting for your local representatives, because if you don't do that, then you're never going to see change in your community. And it's like, the funds that are allocated to these communities are based off your public officials who you elect in office, and a lot of people fail to realize that. They just think like, oh, we're just voting for the president, but no, it's voting for much more. Like right now, the Supreme Court justice spot is up, and it's just like, who's gonna take it? Because Ruth Bader Ginsburg just passed away, and it's like, is Trump gonna elect somebody to go in there, or we're gonna wait to see if whoever's elected next is gonna fill that spot? So I don't know. It's not just about voting for the president.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I feel like you need a vote to see a change. Like, you cannot blame, you cannot complain, you cannot blame anyone else if you did not vote, because you cannot say that you tried. So I feel like voting is important, because if you want to see a change, you need to vote. You need to at least try to see what you want happen.
And I think it's important that she said that you have to vote in every aspect of it too, and in every election, because I mean, we vote for, you know, the president and the vice president and judges and things like that that might seem like they're more prevalent in society, but we still have to vote for, you know, people like the superintendents of the school district and things like that, because we vote for those people too, and those people have a huge effect on things like, you know, maybe the school to prison pipeline and things like that, and that, you know, affects mass incarceration of Black and brown people. And I think that, you know, all of it is such a huge problem in our country, but like she said, it's very important to not just acknowledge the presidential elections, or not just the big ones, or not just, you know, the House or the Senate or anything like that. It's important to, you know, vote in your local communities too, and like just your city or just your county or something like that.
Right. And I think those things have been extremely emphasized, and, you know, even more now. I think people don't pay as much attention to local elections. And to be honest, you don't hear about them as much. So it's definitely important to get informed and educated yourselves, as well as educating others. So.
And know who you're voting for. Like,
Absolutely.
don't
Do
just
your
vote
homework.
for somebody just because your parents tell you to vote for them, just because your teammates say like, oh, this is who I'm voting for. Like, actually, like, watch the news, like social media, yeah, but like actually be informed. Like, know who you're voting for. Know what their beliefs are. Know what their morals are. Like, don't just vote because, oh, like I say I'm a Republican or I say I'm a Democrat and this is the candidate, but just know like what comes with it.
Yeah, I think what's important to note too is, I mean, you can go to candidates' websites and find out what they believe in, what they're for, and you honestly may not agree with everything down the list. And so I know some people talk about like the lesser of two evils, but definitely, you know, voting for those people that line up with who you are, your morals, your values, and what's most important to you. Well, I am extremely grateful for our time. Thank you guys for your feedback. I want to make sure, is there anything more that you have to say before we end our conversation? Well, you said a lot. You've shared a lot, and again, I'm very appreciative. I think, like you guys said, these conversations are vital and extremely important, and I look forward to having more. And I also look forward to being alongside you as we try to affect change in our communities and our society. I will, as a Black woman in sport, I cheer you on in everything, not just here but in life, and just look forward to all of the wonderful things that you all will accomplish. So we are signing out. Go Mean Green.